Let's welcome retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, now at Heritage Foundation. Colonel, great to have you on. Your reaction to the U.S. intelligence community believes that China intentionally concealed the severity of the outbreak in January in order to hoard and to pull in medical supplies from around the world. Your reaction to that story?
Well, it's good that it's more than just the U.S. saying that. So to have our allies saying the same sort of thing, reaching those conclusions, and it's not surprising at all if it turns out to be accurate that the repressive authoritarian regime in Beijing is acting like that. I mean, that's just the nature of these forms of government. Control information, always have a posture of being in control. They don't want to be embarrassed. And they're going to hide any kind of problems that might exist inside the country. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise. And it's also a warning that you can't trust what China is saying any more than what you can trust what Moscow is saying or North Korea or Iran. And we always have to verify information via second and third order sources.
Yeah, and, you know, Colonel, we reported a couple months ago that China was trying to grab the patent for remdesivir in January before the world knew what was going on. Then we're seeing reports China researchers are trying to attack Gilead's remdesivir as not working. So that's another story that's happening. To what you're saying, the Australian newspaper, the Saturday Telegraph, is reporting on a leaked, scathing rebuke of China by the Five Eyes Consortium of Intelligence, the U.S., UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, that China accidentally leaked COVID-19 from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Look at this. This is what they're finding. That China had a virus, been working on a virus just like the one that is broken loose in 2013. That they've been working on it for 7 years. You know, we saw this happen in 2004 when SARS-CoV broke out of a lab in Beijing and infected at least one person, may have killed 9 people. We've been here before, Colonel.
Well, yes. I mean, in all countries do some form of genetic research so as to come up with new vaccines and treatments. If you're concerned about bioterrorism or biowarfare, you know, how would you respond to that effectively with treatments? So the fact that they were working on it shouldn't be a surprise. The fact that they had lax protocols and something escaped the lab is a testament or a damnation of their competency in doing these sorts of things. So I guess, you know, it's not a surprise. It's an indication of the nature of this particular regime. And if you also follow that kind of reporting, they remove any instances of reporting from social media. They restrict the flow of information, especially to their own people, to maintain this facade of authority there in Beijing. And so this should really translate into the nature of the economic relationships we have, whether we allow China to build 5G infrastructure in places like the continent of Europe and certainly the United States. So everything needs to be taken with skepticism and some kind of assurity that we can validate or go to a second or third source to verify anything that Beijing says.
Yeah, it's happening now. Europe is pushing to effectively punish China, saying we don't want Huawei in here. That's what Germany and France is saying. We're seeing countries in Africa, certainly France, are calling in their ambassadors, the Chinese ambassadors, saying, what are you doing there in China? Also we're seeing China held off informing the WHO that the coronavirus was a contagion, concealed that it was human to transmission. But how do you hold China accountable? I mean, again, the backlash against China is now growing around the world, and the WHO is blocking one of the biggest whistleblowers of all, Taiwan. Is still not allowed at WHO's table. So how do you go say to China and the WHO, stop it, we can't do this again, we can't have another pandemic like this?
Well, I think voters across countries observe behavior by the World Health Organization. Can you trust it? They observe behavior and truthfulness out of Beijing. Can you trust them? And the penalty imposed is, do you want to do business with a regime that behaves the way the Communist Party behaves out of China? So if you have a trade deal, if you have exported or outsourced your production, if you're always going for lowest price, and then you find the person giving you the lowest price is a human rights violator, that they use essentially slave labor, subsidizing their currency and the products, serial theft of intellectual property. I mean, it's all consistent, right, in a pattern of behavior. So does a country, the United States, Germany, Great Britain, Australia, whomever, want to do business and provide wealth to that country that gives them that sort of advantage? So I think with 1.4 billion people, there are promises that Beijing has to make to its growing middle class. And to see a degrading of foreign financial investment in that country is going to be a serious penalty as we see these production lines and supplier bases leaving China and going elsewhere. So I think that's going to be the biggest cost imposed on China in the near future.
Yeah, that's happened even before the pandemic. They were moving supply chains out of China into other parts of Asia, including Vietnam. Colonel Wood, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your service to our country. Great to have you on, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing for the American public.